Welcome to the Peachtree Podcast. Peachtree Learning Center is a nonprofit in Middle Tennessee dedicated to training and discipling students in all the fine arts to become excellent and skilled in order to spread the kingdom of God into the world of the arts. On this podcast, we will discuss topics designed to encourage, uplift, educate, and equip people to proclaim the kingdom more deeply in their own families and communities. Hello and welcome to the podcast of Peachtree Learning Center. We're a fine arts center in Middle Tennessee, as you might have just heard on the bumper notes, and we do lots of music and art and dance and drama in two beautiful old church buildings in Middle Tennessee. We're very grateful for the way God has blessed us, especially this school year with a second location, and then provided for us to take care of that building as well. And we're just in love with all the people that have found us there and the way we've started off this year with a really sweet group of families and been able to have our teachers come to the second space and share what they know with a fresh group of people. It's been a very sweet time. And we're looking down the pike towards the end of the school year already. And there's a lot of things coming up that I think we'll talk about in next week's edition. But this week, I wanted to talk about a subject that we visited before. And it kind of centers around reasons for reading good books and reasons for reading old books. And we talked to Dr. Carolyn Weber a couple of weeks ago about this topic. She's actually writing a book about this herself and exploring the idea of older books and what it brings us to be able to read older books. But I recently ran across some quotes that I had made notes about in a couple of books that I had read. And one of them is from George MacDonald. And I'll just start off with a quote. He says, "It will be a bad day for us when we have done with Shakespeare, for that will imply, along with the loss of him, that we are no longer capable of understanding him." And there's another quote about Shakespeare that came from a website called Afterthoughts. And it says, "Is it that a lot of the cancellations we see are just trying to find a moralistic rationale to justify our lack of curiosity? I can't read Shakespeare. I'm not curious enough to try to read Shakespeare. Therefore, something must be wrong with Shakespeare. Much of it comes from a lack of an ability to understand and the pride that comes from not understanding. That's the chief difference between people who learn and people who don't. People who learn are able to say, 'I don't get it.' People who don't learn are going to shoot the messenger." And those quotes really are sobering because they just point to the fact that I think we live in a day and time when we discourage leaving a comfort zone, or we discourage, especially our children, even from doing things that they don't like to do, or things that aren't easy for them, or things that don't come naturally, instead of encouraging them to go for it and dig in and go deeper and longer and wider and higher and spread their comfort zone to cover more territory. I believe we're actually kind of partly our children's cheerleaders, and we should be trying to help them spread that comfort zone as big and wide as they can. I think comfort zones are man-made, and so making it small means it keeps us in a very small space and doesn't let us expand our borders or cover more territory as people of God. And we're here to claim as much ground for the kingdom as we can. So all that to say, I think when our children just look at us and say, "Well, this book is hard," or "This subject is hard, I don't want to do it," that it's kind of our job to say, "Well, too bad. Time to put on your big girl pants or your big boy pants and get back in there and try harder." And one person's imagining of that the end of that road is found in a book called Fahrenheit 451, and that book is actually titled "For the Burning Point of Paper," because Ray Bradbury was imagining a world in which paper was burned from books, that the fire departments became departments of people who were dispatched to get rid of books and destroy them in big piles. And when this book takes place, the piles have gotten smaller and they're down to chasing rumors about people who have books hidden in their houses, and they are weaponized to go in and take books from people who have them and arrest people who own them and burn the books on the spot. But in his commentary about that book, he talked about the firemen in that book almost being unnecessary because the public had stopped reading of its own accord in his imagination. And he was imagining a world where people just quit reading books. They quit being curious about other time periods or other circumstances or other people's stories, and got so preoccupied with their own that the fire departments, who were there simply to build fires for books, were scrounging around for work, and they weren't really necessary in the same way that they had been at the beginning of that societal story. And it's just a sobering thought to think that
We could get to the point where banning books or monitoring books isn't even necessary because people don't have the curiosity to read them. Another observation he made back in the 1940s was he mentioned that in his view, mass media was going to lead to Americans being a less literal people or a less literary people. And I have to say, in my lifetime, I've seen evidence of that. I've seen us move from a people that gathered around the evening news and possibly 1 or 2 hours worth of primetime television, and seeing television stations sign off the air by 11 or midnight, to round the clock news, round the clock entertainment, and hundreds of channels of availability, so that there's almost no time when you can't find something on that you might perhaps want to watch. And it's chock full of commercials and chock full of things that really don't deserve your attention, and yet it's an easy thing to just turn it on and turn your brain off. In the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, the author pointed out that the word amuse literally means not to think. A in Latin is opposite or not, and muse means to think. So when we amuse ourselves, we literally don't think anymore. He imagined 2 worldviews. One imagined that we would fall from within, that we would be so preoccupied with our own things that we would just crumble, and then contrasted that against a worldview that said America would end up with the government watching over us and spying on us and arresting people for different points of view. And his third worldview idea was that we would just crumble because we didn't care anymore. We would be so amused that we would literally amuse ourselves into death as a society and as a nation. And that worldview is honestly, that trajectory is actually scarier of the 3, I think, the scariest, because it doesn't require any outside forces exerted on us. We do it to ourselves. If you are a student of history at all, you know that most democratic-leaning societies have crumbled from within. And one big chunk of that reasoning seems to crop up every time when I study this, and it is that the people forgot to read. They forgot how to read, or they quit wanting to read and learn. They quit being curious, and they became very navel-gazing and self-absorbed. And that's something that, as parents, we have to fix in ourselves on some levels before we can turn around and help our children learn past that. But that's one reason parenting, I think, is such a gift, because you do have to care for someone outside yourself. And then you want to teach them to do the same thing. And we have an opportunity in that. We have such a huge opportunity and such a ministry chance to teach others who are coming behind us how to live. And one big piece of that really needs to be just absorbing other cultures, absorbing other time periods, being able to understand and have empathy for people in different time periods and in different circumstances than our own. It's really kind of like looking into time capsules to go and read stories that are set in other periods, and being able to understand what it felt like to grow up in the Great Depression, or to live through World War I or II, or to, beyond that, go back to Laura Ingalls Wilder. And what was it like to live on the prairie when America was open and there were very few cities past the Mississippi River? What did that feel like? And be able to understand that from an empathetic point of view, and then understand it helps us appreciate our own circumstances more. And it also helps us be grateful for the things that people have fought and died to give us. We have a much bigger well of gratitude if we understand what those circumstances and what those people went through. So there's just a lot of good reasons to be able to share good historical stories. Ken Myers, in the book called All God's Children in Blue Suede Shoes, said, "The more we lose contact with folk culture, we will find ourselves unable to tell stories." And in his words, he predicts that what will happen is, when we become unable to tell a story, we will instead make movies that are nothing but a series of special effects. We've become more and more technically proficient in our filmmaking and less able to tell a story. And I'm just going to confess that I feel like we see a manifestation of that now. We see lots of movies that have tons and tons of really impressive special effects, but the characters are just not people that we want to enjoy. We would enjoy knowing, or we feel empathy for, or even sympathy for. I've left theater several times myself in the last decade or so, feeling like I didn't really have an invested interest in what happened to the characters. And so I was just disappointed in the storytelling. It wasn't great storytelling. It didn't create a desire in me to want to know more, or a desire for a good ending wasn't satisfied, or there wasn't resolution in some way, or there wasn't even a drive to want that to happen for people, that I didn't feel a need to help those characters resolve. It just wasn't a compelling story. And God told us such compelling stories. I feel like we need to inculcate in our children a desire for that. He uses stories to reach out to us and talk to us. And I think I'm just going to beat this drum again and say that we really need to be practicing that at home. And so on this week of spring break or beyond this spring, might be a great time to go and find some new stories, some fresh books to read over the summer maybe. I know at Peachtree, we've really beefed up our lobby libraries this year, and we've got over 1,000 titles in the two locations combined of just really good stories. We try to handpick those. But, if you don't have a public library at home in your town, look for small libraries. There are subscription libraries cropping up around the country, and a lot of times those are people who've gathered books that they really valued over time, and then they're willing to open up and for a small fee share those with people who are careful with their books and just as interested in good reading as they are. So find you a place to grab some of those books and just get in them with your children and enjoy them. If you haven't done it before, this is a great time to start.
Thank you so much for joining us today. To support this podcast, please go follow us on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're interested in knowing more about the work of Peachtree, please go visit our website at peachtreelearningcenter.com for more information.